Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Well, as the world is being reshapen by redistricting and everything else that's going on across the country, and we see the hostages coming home, and we're so excited about what's happening in Washington, D.C. with President Trump, we still have this state that some people said would one day fall into the ocean, but it is a huge state, and it's very important to us, and we have big hope this year that California is going to get it together and come out and vote for a Republican governor. So we have Steve Hilton with us. Thank you so much for joining the Tudor Dixon Podcast.
Oh, Judy, it's so fantastic to be with you. I really, really loved your campaign. I followed that so closely. We were with you, and I feel in spirit we're on the same kind of journey, trying to bring sanity to our state. It's totally not easy, but we got to go for it, right? That's how we feel, you and I.
Absolutely. And as I try to do a little research on California because it's different out there. It's different than it is in most other states. First of all, you have ballot harvesting, which most people think is illegal, but California, it's actually legal. You guys legalized this in, I think, 2016. So people can actually go door to door, gather up ballots, and take them in for someone else. That blows my mind. How do you get past that?
Well, you're right. And that's just one example of the insanity. Yeah. Like there are so many ways in which the Democrats over these 15 years now of one party rule where they've controlled everything in California. They've had the governor's seat. They've had all the statewide offices, total control of the legislature with a supermajority, all the big cities, all the big counties. So it's been one party rule and they get totally corrupted by power. And that's what's happened. So year after year, they've been mucking around with our elections. And so, yes, you've got ballot harvesting, just like you. I assume when I first heard that term, I thought that's got to be a joke. They would, right. If that was real, they would never give it such a corrupt sounding name. What are you talking about? Ballot harvesting. Anyway, it is exactly right. You got that. Then you have the early voting. I know we see that all over the country now, but wait for this. Your ballot can come in 7 days after the election. Right?
What?
And they do universal mail-in voting. So everybody gets sent a ballot in the mail, everyone on the voter rolls. The voter rolls, the last count is coming down with some great action by some friends and supporters of mine. We're cleaning up the voter rolls. Not that long ago, you had 5 million people on the voter rolls who shouldn't have been. And so they all get sent ballots. So that they're sitting there, ballots, literally. But you have stories of people, I have like 10 ballots in my house in the hallway pushed through the mail. Dead people who've left the state. Of course, they can all be harvested. You can send them in the mail. It counts as long as it's postmarked before Election Day. You have 7 days after Election Day for it to be counted. Then you don't get the results for a month afterwards. On and on. It's so terrible. But here's the point, that we can't change any of that until we're actually elected. So my message always is just as President Trump said with the presidential election last time, we got to make it too big to rig, swamp the vote. The only response here is we got to do it too, and we got to do it better than them. So let's get out and we do our own ballot harvesting, and we make sure that our votes get in early and are counted. So that's what I'm saying all the time. And I think that, people really have understood that we've got to win with this system before we get to change it.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, exactly your words, what the president was saying, too big to rig. That's what he accomplished. That when you heard so much about all of these ground games, that was critical. But in California, yes, so much more so because of what we just talked about. So how do you recruit those people? How do you bring people in? Because the Democrats have done it. They've been very successful at doing it. I don't believe for a second that they have organically won these elections. And I think the people of California are very fed up. I know Rick Grinnell has worked out
yes,
in California very hard to get congressional seats. I think you can win.
Yes. Well, let me just lay out, Judy. I mean, you know this, the numbers are what it's all about. And so my argument is, I've always said, it's not going to be easy to win, but it's not impossible. And here's just a couple of the ingredients that I think should give us that confidence. Number one, there's a majority in California now, pretty steady majority for the last at least 2 years, saying that we're going in the wrong direction, the state's on the wrong track. In other words, there's a majority for change in California. And it's quite a size, it's over 60%. It's not a small number. And so people know we need change. That's the first point. Secondly, in the elections last year in 2024, 10 counties out of 58 flipped from blue to red, including some big counties like Fresno, our fifth biggest city. Then you look at how President Trump performed in California, the best result for any presidential nominee from the Republican side for a generation. Didn't really even campaign here. And then you look at the numbers, and this is the really important point, exactly to your point about turnout. So next year, obviously, is a midterm election, and typically you get a lower turnout. But we can change the turnout if we do our job right. And when people say there aren't enough Republican votes in California, I point them to the numbers. So last year was a presidential year, but if you take the last 2 midterm years to get an estimate of what the vote will be next year, the total number of votes we expect in California, 11.8 million. So to win, you need 5.9 million, roughly half, just over half. President Trump last year got 6.1 million votes in California. So the Republican votes are there. We just need to go and make sure they turn out and vote for governor for change next year. And there's one final ingredient that should give us optimism. There's a ballot initiative that we are collecting signatures for right now in California to get voter ID on the ballot for next November. If we have that, Republicans love voter ID. That will be hugely helpful for increasing Republican turnout. So if we have a great campaign, a good ground game, all those things, make sure our voters turn out. We can absolutely do this next year.
Absolutely. And you go to California. I was in California about a year ago, and I thought to myself, it is so incredibly beautiful here. How are they not wanting to preserve this? And I was in the Malibu area where now I know there was a lot of decimation from the fire and the everything that went on there. We're looking at from the middle of the country here in the Midwest, we're looking out at California and we think after you've suffered these tragedies and what we see with the homeless population in San Francisco and LA and the dirty streets, it's just not the beautiful California that it was in so many of these areas. There's got to be a lot of motivation to change that.
Yes. Exactly. I mean, that's the theme of my campaign. I mean, the slogan of my campaign is golden again, right? Let's make California golden again. It's the golden state. Everyone, look, I moved here in 2012 with my wife and my 2 sons from England, became an American in 2021. So I've been here 13 years. Even in the years that I've been here, the decline has been so evident. I mean, it's been going on a long time. It's 15 years now of one-party rule. And really, you've had very little interruption. They've had the state legislature for nearly 30 years. And so the piling on of ridiculous regulations and taxes, everything that makes it so impossible to do anything here, combined with the ideological extremism, that's what's led to the explosion in homelessness and crime and chaos and the squalor, as you say, just the dirt and the squalor and the stink. Honestly, it's disgusting. I'm often in downtown Los Angeles, and you just walk around and it stinks. I'm sorry to say,
it's such
urine
a mean
and
thing.
feces. What are you talking about?
That's mean to allow that. I think that's what the average person is now understanding, to have force people out on the streets, to not have billions of dollars. I mean, they have hundreds of millions of dollars dedicated to homelessness, and yet there is no solution for homelessness. Once you create well, they don't want to give up the hundreds of millions of dollars. All these people are getting paid now. That's how government works. There needs to be someone who's going to go in there and say, come on, where's your heart? Where's your kindness? When are you going to start caring about the people who are drug addicted? They have real problems. They're on the streets and they're causing real problems for the rest of the people in the city. I mean, there is a solution here. It's just that it doesn't want to be taken.
You're so right. That's how I argue it the whole time. I say, look, we would never accept someone we love living in those conditions. We'd want to do something about it urgently. We'd get them out of that situation. We'd get them the help that they need. But these Democrats who've been in charge, I talk about it this way the whole time. It's so cruel and heartless. And it's ideological. So, we can't, there's a law that was passed, 2016, called Housing First, which is that any organization working with homeless people to provide shelter or accommodation, whatever, you cannot require any kind of behavior change in response. You can't require sobriety. You can't get people off drugs. You can't get them into mental health treatment.
Solution.
No, it's just insane. And then actually that cruelty that you talk about and the heartlessness, I think that is the story of these ideologues more generally. Because if you look at the issue, obviously homelessness, crime, the things we've been talking about, those are very visible signs of California's decline. But actually, when you look at what's going on across the board every single day for regular working people and families and small business in California, everything's a disaster. We literally right now have the highest unemployment rate in America, the highest poverty rate in America, the highest taxes, highest cost for gas, electric bills are the highest in the country. The worst business climate. Insurance is a nightmare. A lot of people can't even get insurance because the industry's been so assaulted by these insane regulations.
Unless you illegally cross the border.
Well, then you're fine. And I mean, no joke. I mean,
I know.
People can't afford healthcare.
I wish that were a joke, but that's not a joke.
So you can't. Regular working people in California cannot afford healthcare. Community hospitals are closing. I see this all the time. I'm on the road the whole time, and guess what? They keep increasing. And again, they've increased it from last year's budget to next year's budget. Taxpayer spending for free healthcare for illegal immigrants. And now you have, in Los Angeles just now, biggest county in the country, 10 million people, huge county. It's about 23% of California's population. And you've got the Board of Supervisors there just voted this week for what they called an immigration emergency to give taxpayer handout rent, but to pay the rent of illegal immigrants who are affected by the president's deportation. And you just think, we have the highest house. That's another thing. We have the highest housing costs in the country, highest rent, highest home prices, everything. So you've got, again, regular working people who can barely afford the rent because of the housing crisis. Why do we have a housing crisis? In part because you've had millions of illegal immigrants coming in, so there's not enough housing to cope. So that's pushed up the cost of housing. Regular people can't pay that. So what do the Democrats do? They take more money out of their taxes and hand it out free rent to illegal immigrants who shouldn't even be here. I mean, whose side are they on? This is why I think we're going to get change next year.
Stay here. We have more coming up with Steve Hilton, but if you're over 50 and you're worried about your heart health, then you need to listen to this. A 16-year study of over 30,000 people found that nattokinase, it's an ancient Japanese superfood. It can actually help reduce your heart attack risk and improve your cardiovascular health. Japan has the world's second longest life expectancy for a reason. They've used this powerful and natural enzyme for thousands of years. And now you can get it too at Luma Nutrition. They've perfected a powerful nattokinase formula made in the USA and third-party tested for purity and quality. Buy your supplements from a source you can trust. Luma Nutrition was founded by a former U.S. Army officer, and they are on a mission to provide the highest quality natural supplements that are made right here in the USA. You can try nattokinase today for up to 40% off when you visit lumanutrition.com. That's LUMA nutrition.com. Go to lumanutrition.com. It's veteran owned and it's proudly made in the USA. What more could you want? You're going to lower your heart attack risk. It's going to be great. Go there right now and stay here because we're going to be back with Steve Hilton. Another thing I think that people don't see enough, I think they saw just a glimpse of it with the fire. They saw the Palisades fire and they went, oh my gosh, these people are homeless now. They had these beautiful homes. They can't rebuild. Then the president went there. He brought a lot of attention to the fact that these people can't even rebuild because of your stupid regulations, because government is so in the business of the average person that if you lose your house in a tragedy, you are not allowed to rebuild it for years. And it's still, to me, it's still not getting enough media attention that this is still happening. These people still, they have mortgages. That's the thing people don't understand. Your mortgage doesn't go away because your home burned down. You have a mortgage, you have no place to live, and you can't rebuild.
It's so offensive. And again, the way you put it is so right. That's just heartless because it's this bureaucratic mindset. So you look at some of the numbers now. Malibu, well, you mentioned Malibu, 600 homes burned, 2 permits have been issued. 2.
Ridiculous.
For rebuilding. If you look at all the burned areas, it's under 10% of the number of homes burnt, permits issued. And it really gets to the heart of why these Democrats are so utterly useless. I'll just give you this quote from Karen Bass. It just tells you so much about how these people think. A few months ago now, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, she did, remember, by the way, days after the fires, she sat there at that amazing press conference with the president, and the president exactly just said what you said. Like, people they could go back tomorrow. They could clear their own plane. What's the delay? And she said, we'll clear out the obstacles. There'll be no delay, she said to the president. Right. Months later, nothing had happened. So she makes an announcement. I saw it on social media. Her post said these words. Karen Bass, I have just signed an executive order streamlining permitting so people can rebuild in LA. And thought, okay, that's good. Months late, but whatever. But there was a video underneath of her actual announcement at the press conference. So I thought, I'll watch what she said. This is what she actually said. I have just signed an executive order tasking agency heads with developing paths forward to streamlining permitting. You think, what is that? That's nothing. That's total bureaucratic BS. Nothing's going to happen. No change. It's just some BS process that she's set up.
I'll tell
and
you
sure
what
enough,
I hear.
People I speak to every day, they said they go to the building department. The building department says, you got to go to that department. You got to get your insurance. They go to insurance. They say you need a permit before we get. It's just nightmare for people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very similar situation in Michigan when our reading scores went way down. The governor comes out and says, I'm going to form a committee to figure out how to get the reading scores up. A committee? I mean, that government forming a committee is the worst thing that can ever happen, because it's just it's a press release. That's all it is. It exactly. I hope the American people have figured out that when Democrats put out a press release, that's where it starts and that's where it ends. It was just to get attention. I mean, the same thing with bringing businesses in. And you're in a very similar situation to Michigan. You talk about the fact that you have high gas prices, high energy prices. You have also a situation where you have a massive out of control illegal immigrant problem, because you're right there at the border, and the governor has said, come here and you'll be safe and we'll pay for you. So you have an out of control tax problem.
Exactly. Again, highest taxes in the country. Here's another. I mean, I take all the, you and I, we do our homework, right? So, and I've got a business background. Most of my people know me from Fox, but most of my career has been in business. I've worked all over the world in business, started my own companies, including here in California. I ran restaurants in England. That is a tough business. So I know about budgets. You look at the budget of the state of California. In the last 10 years, they've doubled the budget. Doubled. And everything's worse. And don't you think, these people have no clue how to run anything properly? There's no exactly as you say. They're not even interested in results and outcomes. And did that happen? And what happened to that money? And why didn't it work? None of that. It's just the press release making the announcement.
I was just watching this old interview of Gavin Newsom where he kind of blew up at the person who was interviewing him, because they were like, and as mayor, you have a massive deficit. And he said, yeah, it's a huge deficit. That's a thing. And I think Democrats are so used to just getting away with this. And I give the interviewer credit, because he really pushed back on him. And he had just dropped out of the race for governor at that point. This was years ago. And he was kind of like had his tail between his legs and was sulking. But that's another thing that a Republican can never get away with. You can't get away with being a smart aleck and telling off the interviewer. But your opponent recently thought that she could. So I want to play the clip for people in case you missed it, because Katie Porter she's currently leading. I think that lead is rapidly going away. I noticed that I was looking at the polls from July to August to September. She has gone down a couple points every single time. You're going up in the polls. I think she thinks she's an interesting character, because I think she thinks, well, I will go up against Steve Hilton. What will happen is that it will be that I won't, the Republicans are fewer, like you said, that myth that the Republicans, there's not as many votes. So I want him there. And the interviewer asked her, what are you going to do to get those votes? And she was like appalled. So I want to play this for you so that people, if you missed it, you can hear this is what the opponent is like. Here it is.
Do you think you need any of those 40% of California voters to win? And you're saying, no, you don't.
No, I'm saying I'm going to try to win every vote I can. And what I'm saying to you is that.
Well, to those voters. Okay, so you.
I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to call it. Okay. Thank you.
You're not going to do the interview with us?
Nope, not like this. I'm not. Not with 7 follow-ups to every single question you ask.
Every other candidate has answered
I don't
our
care.
follow-ups.
I don't care. I want to have a pleasant, positive conversation, which you ask me about every issue on this list. And if every question you're going to make up a follow-up question, then we're never going to get there.
Ms.
And
Porter,
we're just going to circle around.
I am an investigative
I have never
reporter.
had to do this before, ever.
You've never had to have a conversation with
to end
a
an
reporter?
interview.
Okay, but every other candidate has done this.
What part of I'm me? I'm running for governor because I'm a leader. I don't want to have an unhappy experience with you, and I don't want this all on camera.
I don't want to have an unhappy experience with you either.
I love this for so many reasons.
I know.
Because every crazy lib woman that puts out a video in her car has this exact emotion. I don't want to have an unhappy time. Like, I need a safe space right now. How could you possibly sit down and negotiate businesses to come into this state? How could you possibly concentrate on a solution for homelessness? That's an unhappy situation for Katie Porter, I bet.
It's amazing, actually. It's so funny. It's now more than a week, and it never gets old. I've seen that so many times. By the way, we made this video. I had great pleasure writing it, just editing it out. Where she said, 7 follow-up questions. I said, okay, here are 7 follow-up questions, Katie Porter. Number 1, why do we have the highest unemployment rate in America? Why do we have the highest poverty? Anyway, we spliced it together. It was fun. But look, the attitude that you see there. That's the attitude of all of them, actually. This entitled, arrogant attitude. How dare you ask me questions? No consequences ever for their failures. No accountability. Even the idea of accountability is offensive to them. Like, how dare you question me? That's what you get with this one-party rule, this arrogant, insular, ruling elite. That's what you get.
And the funny thing is that, like, the real takeaway from that interview to me is that she makes it very clear, I don't care at all about those people. That's half her state. She doesn't care about them.
It's exactly right. And to your point, even, if further in the interview, she's talking about, well, there'll be a Republican, and they assume that a Republican can't win, so who cares? And that's why they've gone so extreme, actually, because they just don't think they're ever going to get a challenge from the other side. And so it's entirely about pandering to the people who really pull the strings in the Democratic Party in California, the unions, the far-left activist groups. By the way, I don't know if you saw, there was another one this week, Betty Yee. I don't know if you saw this one.
I didn't see that.
Okay, let me just... So she's also running for governor. She's like way down. As you say, in the polls, it's basically, most of the polls show me and Katie Porter as the top 2. And we have this top 2 jungle primary system. So that's the top 2 go forward, whichever party they're from. Anyway, there's a bunch of other Democrats who aren't doing at all well. And one of them is Betty Yee, elected. She's currently the state controller. And we were both on Piers Morgan, and to talk about Katie Porter. And Betty Yee's called on Katie Porter to drop out of the race because of this terrible interview. Anyway, Piers Morgan happened to know Katie Porter because they did Bill Maher together. So to his audience, he plays a clip of him and Katie Porter on Bill Maher. And it happened to be about the issue of trans athletes. And so he plays this clip, goes to Betty Yee, just out of interest. It wasn't a tough question. It's like, where do you stand on that issue? And so she immediately gave the ridiculous kind of woke, well, I think there should be equal opportunity, fairness, blah, 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 And he kind of pounced. He said, okay, so you're saying that you think it's okay for biological men to compete with, and she just obviously had never had to really defend that position. And so she just recited the nonsense talking points, but we wouldn't let it go. And he said, okay, so you want to be the governor during the LA Olympics in 2028. Are you telling me that you think that biological men should compete in the Olympics against women in LA? And she said, well, I do think that trans women athletes are women. And yes,
of course.
And then he goes, so which sports do you think, apart from maybe archery, which sports do you think that would be okay for? And she says, well, probably track and field. Track and field? What are you talking about?
Worst one.
And no, it's insane. It's just as much of a car crash as Katie Porter. And then he said, okay, what examples? What do you mean? And she says, well, the shorter races. He said, what? Like the 100 meters? You think that Usain Bolt? And she said, yes. And said, so what you're telling me, Betty, is that you would like to have a gender-neutral Olympics. She literally said, yes, I think that's what, we should have, yes, a gender-neutral Olympics for LA.
Wow.
And this is, I mean, only someone who's just totally uninterested in the views of normal people and her constituents only cares about pandering to the activists who really control the party would say such a thing. But that's who they are these days in California.
But this is going to be so fun for you. And I say that because they have never been asked questions before. And I think I just sort of have this sneaking suspicion that Kamala ruined that for them, that they had the media wrapped around their little finger and they would do whatever they wanted and they didn't get follow-ups. But let me tell you, and you've probably experienced the same thing. When I was running, I think it was an NBC reporter. I don't know if you were there. I'm asking Sarah. I don't think you were on the campaign yet. We had this NBC reporter who stood out. She tried to get into an event that we were in, and they wouldn't let her into the event. I mean, it wasn't open to media. They wouldn't let her into the event. She stood outside, knocked on the windows, and said, answer my questions, answer my questions. Finally, when the event was over, we said, there was no door we could go out. She had a cameraman at one door. There were like 3 doors to the building. They had someone posted at every door. They were not going to let us leave without like physically grabbing us and making us do an interview. And so we finally said, you know what, we'll do it, but you're coming in and you're sitting down and you're going to set up appropriately. This isn't going to be like a gotcha interview. We'll sit down with you. Can you imagine them doing that to a Democrat? I mean, Katie Porter would just lose her mind.
Exactly. They've never had. It's exactly right. And the press in California, the media in California are just they assume that these people are going to be in charge forever. So it's exactly that total complicit attitude. But you're right. It is changing. It is changing. And I think that's right. They saw with Kamala Harris, oh my gosh, this was the consequence when we didn't put someone put through their paces.
That has been one of the things that it's kind of like a bittersweet situation because I do feel like it is now you finally are forcing these women in the Democrat Party to sit down and Whitmer had the same thing. I mean, she's never really sat down for an interview. She's had very easy MSNBC interviews where they just coddle her and, cuddle her, stick a bottle in her mouth. She's great, but they've never actually tortured her at all. And I think that's going to change. I say it's bittersweet because I think that Kamala Harris made women look really idiotic. Her stumbling over her words, saying she washes her vegetables in the bathtub, all of these bananas things that I was like, oh my gosh, this is not who we are. Like, you watch it as a woman and you're like, no, stop saying these stupid things.
I know. I've always said that. That's why they always go to sexism and blame sexism when Hillary did it and Kamala does it. And you just think it's so insulting. Look at all the fantastic conservative women leaders that have been elected all over the world. In my home, in the UK, Margaret Thatcher, of course. And, there's so many examples. And it's so pathetic that when they have terrible candidates who happen to be women, they say, oh, of course it's sexism. No, it's because they're useless.
Oh, we were just actually recently talking about this, though, here in our little group of what Republican women have been lifted up as great leaders in this country. I mean, first of all, there have been few because I think it's taken longer for the Republican Party to bring women in and bring women in at a higher number. But also, it's very hard for Republican women to be taken seriously on channels like MSNBC and CNN and just in general. And then you get these Democrat women who, I mean, let's face it, Kamala Harris was always kind of pushed up as that DEI candidate. And no, people don't like to hear that, but there is when the president of the United States chooses you for vice president and then has to step out of the next race and doesn't automatically say, obviously, my vice president is the choice, then everybody knows you were only put there for one reason. And it's not because you can lead the country.
He said it himself. He said, I'm going to pick a black woman. First, it was a woman. He made that pledge, and then he said, "I'm going to be a black woman." So, you can't argue with that. He said it,
right? And it hurts that, and I think that was the point that so many conservatives were making, and maybe not as eloquently as they should have. But the point is, when you don't hire, there is no reason that he couldn't have found an actually qualified Black woman who could have spoken. If that was really his choice, well, there are plenty, but he went for the person that would get the donors and all of that, but had no ability to actually talk. But when you're not hiring someone because you think they're the best person to sit beside you, to be your right-hand man or your right-hand woman, then you are hurting women, you are hurting minorities. And that's what they do on a regular basis.
Exactly, because identity is everything to them.
Yes.
And you still see it now, just the way they talk, it's just so, it actually feels very old fashioned, because I think, thanks to, it's just so, I think a huge refreshing change happened with the president's victory last year and the scale of it and the popular vote and everything, just throwing off this, we don't have to say that anymore. We don't have to pretend anymore.
Yes.
But so most normal people, the vast majority of the country, honestly, even if they didn't vote for President Trump or not Republicans, have just, I just think there's this freedom, this lightness now that we don't have to go along with this nonsense. But the Democrats, the politicians, they're still stuck there. They still talk like this. They haven't realized that the whole country's moved on.
That's right. And that's why you ended up in that situation with the men in women's sports and gender. Suddenly we go from that to gender neutral Olympics. I mean, they just keep doubling down on that. And they're in that situation right now with this government shutdown because Schumer is kind of being held hostage by AOC, and AOC is a radical. And you see the Mamdani. I kind of loved that debate that we watched between Mamdani and Cuomo and Sliwa, because they were pushing him like, you can't pay for this stuff. You can't do this. And even though I think that New York is going to be lost in this election, I think that helps you, because California, I really believe that the people of California, they are wealthy. They have these beautiful communities that are being infiltrated by bad policies. You can't. I remember my aunt lived there, and it was like, for her to build a room on her house, you'd have to have God come down and sign off on it. It's like,
it's insane.
The regulation is too much.
The stories, I mean, there's so many stories. Everywhere I go, you hear these stories, but just one the other day that was just so unbelievable. Everyone here believes it because they experienced it. There was a lady, they have a very small independent winery in wine country in California, and she wanted to increase, it's like, just small, not some lavish thing. And she built a new patio, extended the patio so she could have more visitors for the wine tastings and lunch and whatever. And I think it was an increase from a capacity of 35 to 50 people. So this is not some giant thing. She said it took her 6 years and $1 million.
I know.
Fees, inspections, environmental compliance, this, that. It's unbelievable how bad it is.
I could tell you so many stories from Michigan. I mean, we could honestly go on and on about this. I've gone too long already. I will just say that one example of this that we're seeing crop back up. Do you remember the squirrel that was killed by Governor Hochul in New York City or in New York State because it was the rescue squirrel? Yes. So right now in Michigan, there's a blind deer that has been rescued, and it's at a rescue center where they are keeping it for educational purposes. They don't have the right permit for it. And I think we have officially stopped it, but there was a kill order from the DNR to go in there and get rid of this deer. I mean, this is the kind of government overreach that when people start hearing about it, they go, wait a minute. You don't kill the family squirrel. You just don't do that. That's when you start driving people crazy. But that is those are the little things. And I think that the point of that is that when you see that they can go in and they can use the government power to do that. And in Michigan, they've shut down a lot of pig farms and wild game sites and everything by using these agencies. That's why the governor is so important, because the governor has the ability to control these agencies and reduce these regulations. These regulations that act as laws should never happen. That's why what you're doing is so critical, and you can save California. I will just say also, when I was a kid, I remember California Girls, the song. It was like you lived in the Midwest, and California had this aura about it. We just thought California was the most amazing state. We would tell people we live in the United States. We have California. California had this fantastic reputation, and my cousins lived out there. They were true California girls, surfers every day. and all the movies, Clueless, everything that was all based in California, and we loved California. There was never this tainted view of, well, California's dirty and disgusting. And I know you will bring back that golden California that you talk about. That is it. So
Exactly.
tell people, because you're going to need money, you need help.
Yes,
this is a
thank you.
beast
Well, you know.
to go up against. Yes,
Exactly.
tell us
Money,
where to
and
go.
also volunteers, because they've
Yes.
got this big machine. I call it the Democrat industrial complex. Especially the unions and the activists and the bureaucracy. And they've had it all their own way for a long time. So please get involved. SteveHiltonforGovernor.com. FOR. SteveHiltonforGovernor.com. Send us a bit of money, but just sign up. There's a button that says get involved. We're just getting our volunteer army together now, so it's the perfect time. SteveHiltonforGovernor.com.
And as I pointed out earlier, the army there is more important than I think any other place, because their army can just grab ballots. We've got to send people out there for you. So if you can, go out there and help. Steve Hilton, thank you so much for coming on today.
Great to be with you. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. As you know, you can get it on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch it on Rumble or YouTube at Tudor Dixon. And make sure you join us next time. Have a blessed day.